Ken Burke, welcome to the Buy, Grow, Sell podcast.
Simon, thank you so much. I'm really excited to be here.
Look, it's a pleasure. I'm really looking forward to unpacking your story and just going on a bit of a journey together. So do appreciate you giving us your time.
Beautiful.
Um, Ken, maybe I know we're going to talk about your business MarketLive today and what an amazing sort of experience and ultimately an exit that was for you. Maybe you could kick off and just give us a little of your background and what kind of led to you starting that company.
Yeah, well, I started out of grad school, so I have a master's degree in entrepreneurship from USC here in the States. It's a fairly good entrepreneurial school, and so I've had entrepreneurism, flowing in my blood since age 5 or 6. It just has always been the case. I don't think I ever thought I was going to work for someone, but as an entrepreneur, you work for everyone. So there goes that idea, right? Whoops. And I just love, and I learned this about myself. I love growing businesses. I love growing things. It doesn't necessarily need to be a business. It's just that idea of growth. And I actually wrote a book about it called Prosper at the beginning of the year. I released it on Amazon, and it's done very well. And it really, Prosper is all about talking about, we're really all here to learn, grow, and develop from a philosophical, maybe a spiritual perspective. I know that's not what we're talking about today, and that's really what a business represents to me. I know I'm at my best when I'm growing something. And I got to tell you, we got the ups and downs. So MarketLive was a great, I bootstrapped it from, like, I didn't know back when I started in 95, and I know I'm a bit older than your normal guests, right? But back when I started in 95, it was my first business. And at the time, I didn't know anything about VCs or angels. And there really wasn't the same infrastructure that we have today. Here, certainly, I'm in San Francisco. So I have a little bit of an advantage that we have a wildly developed infrastructure for VC and angel investment. And it's almost like it's what everybody talks at the bars and the restaurants is about who your VCs are and blah, 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 blah. I know that doesn't exist all the way around the world, but that is certainly developed in many, many other countries and cities around the world as well. And so we didn't have that back then. So I only knew how to run a business. So I just started it, built some software. I started as a services company, which, by the way, is great. And you can more easily start a services company. I know your audience knows that. There's a problem with a services company. While you can scale it, you scale it with people and it's not as valuable. And so I had to make that whole transition from being a services company with some software. And now we call it a tech-enabled business. But back then we just called it a service business with software to a fully SaaS-based service business. And this was before SaaS companies existed. So in going through that kind of transition, I learned a lot and how to satisfy customers. But one of the things in 2001, we had the dot bomb, 2001, 2002, where most of my competitors were wiped out. But I didn't know any better. And I think my stupidity, quite frankly, was the reason why we were still around, because we just had customers that actually had real businesses. They were in the e-commerce space, but they weren't the .coms. They weren't pets.com and some of the other ones that your audience may never, not even remember, which all went out of business because the VCs pulled their money. They were real companies. And so we just kind of grew with real companies and we serviced them. I didn't have any money. I didn't have any startup capital. We just started a service company. We self-funded it. I then used that money to fund the software. And then our software got better and better and better and better. You probably have heard that story before. Completely bootstrapped. 11 and a half years into the business, I somehow get approached by, I think, a VC that was not Sequoia Capital, because they ultimately funded us, but it was another VC. And then I went in and I hired an investment banker, very basic one, just, kind of grabbed somebody off the street, didn't know him. And he said, "Hey, Ken, let's go ahead and market this thing. Here are these guys coming in. They approached you. They have an offer. But you may want to shop it around a little bit. Good advice for our entrepreneurs out there, not just to go and they all know that now, but back then I didn't know. And so we went to literally Sequoia Capital, and they loved it. Sequoia Capital, I'm sure your audience knows, the number one VC in the world. Google, Apple, Yahoo, LinkedIn, everybody's gone through there. So I'm like, scared to death of these guys. It took me a month and a lot of coercing from them to actually get to take the investment, because I'm like, well, I like the other guys better. And they're like, do you know who we are? And I'm like, no, not really. And I don't really know all this funding stuff. It was all new to me and all that. They like, you know who we are. Nobody says no to us. And then here's the cool story is I start getting calls from random CEOs of major companies in the Bay Area calling me out of nowhere saying, we really think you should go with Sequoia. We've had a great experience. I'm like, I don't even know who you are, but I've heard of you. You're famous, but I don't know who you are. Freaked me out. And then, they kind of just like, after saying no for about 4 weeks, they sat me down we went to a restaurant. I'm telling a little storytelling. I don't mean to, but it's kind of fun,
No, that's
right?
great. We love stories. All
They
good.
sat me down and said, we're at this restaurant in San Francisco, and three of the partners at Sequoia Capital sat me down and said, okay, Ken, we're ready to do a deal. It's going to be a third, a third, a third, a third, a third, a third. I'll never forget it. And we did the same thing at Google. We gave, Sarah, or I can't remember their name, Sven, and what the other guy's name is, Bren, or whatever their names are, a third. We gave the shareholders a third, and we took a third. And I'm like, yeah, no, I'm not liking that. So, I mean, I know it's Google, but that doesn't resonate with me. I want to keep my equity, blah, 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 blah. So we ended up doing a deal for 25% of the company, which, in that day was a lot, but they also gave us a decent amount of money. Okay. So we're off and running at the thing. And then from there, we turned into a SaaS company. We grew. We had the ups and downs and the roller coasters. I was replaced as CEO about 5 or 6 years into the investment. Then I came back, a la Steve Jobs, and recovered the company. I'm not Steve Jobs, trust me, or anywhere close to him. I wish I was, but I'm not. But company took a dive, and we were almost, we're almost out of business. I had to come back in, push the VCs away, and said, "Could you just let me try to recover this thing?" 2 years later, sold it for 10 digits. So
Wow.
10 digits, over $100 million. I won't give the actual amount. So it was ultimately a success. Everybody, all the VCs were all still friends. I mean, friends as far as,
Yeah.
we had a good
Yeah.
experience together, but it was ups and downs. And I got to tell you, I learned a lot from it. But a couple of real quick things: covet thy equity. I always say that, and I always tell my entrepreneurs, don't be giving out equity to everybody and their brother. When you start giving out equity, you're giving out, because when you start, you're going to keep going, because every VC that invests in you has a reserve fund for you if you don't know it, and maybe 1 to 2 rounds. They've already reserved the money, right? That they know they're going to do 1 to 2 more rounds with you. So if you don't think you're going to get diluted, they're not going to get diluted because they're putting more money in, but you're going to get diluted. And if you have a down round where your valuation is lower than the last round, ooh, that hurts. We had a down round. One of the 5 rounds we did was a down round. And so there's a lot of ups and downs and roller coasters with that. So covet thy equity. Number one, don't just say we're 50-50 partners. Okay. Don't ever do a 50-50 partnership. They don't work, period. Do a 3-person partnership. Do somebody what has 49 and 51. That's good, but don't do that. So covet the equity. I forgot the other one already. So I'm going to stop there, but I'm sure it will pop back in.
I'm sure it'll come
let me tell
back.
you this real quick. One other thing that I learned, and that one of my board members and mentors taught me, was don't have a parent-child relationship with your VCs or your board members. And when I didn't learn that lesson until the second time, when I came back as CEO and said, guys, here's what we're doing. Okay, let's just listen. I've got 5 key initiatives in 2 years to sell the company for as much as I possibly can. No BS. Leave me alone. Give me $2 million, because I had no money when I came back. I need $2 million, which they gave in a second. It was like not even thinking about it. And leave me alone. And that's what they did. We ended up taking it. We quadrupled the value of the company literally within 2 years. Had a wonderful exit, very positive. And now the company's probably worth $2 or $3 billion, or $4 billion with the current owners. And so that's the success. But the thing is, don't succumb to the partners. You've got to stand your ground with these guys, because they will push you around and they will take on the parent, where then you're always trying to please them. And guess what? You can't please them. It's impossible. If you think your sales goal is high right now, just wait till you make that goal. Because as soon as you make your sales goal, guess what's going to happen? They're going to double it, and they're going to push you to double it. I call it a drug dealer strategy. My personal, because they stick the needle in your arm with the money. They know they can give you more money, and then they just keep on coaxing you more and more. And I love them to death. I even told them that this is drug dealer strategy. And so they stay, so be careful with how you manage your board, how you manage your investors, and really take control. The last thing I'm going to say, and then I'm going to shut up, I promise, which is really important. Here's what Sequoia told me. Sequoia Capital told me right after they gave me the money, the first meeting. They said, Ken, 3 strikes, you're out. And here's how it works. If you make a mistake, that's strike 1. If we demand, or if we together agree on a strategy or something you're going to do, and it's wrong and it fails, strike 2 on you. And if we force you to take a strategy, strike 3 on you. Okay. So good luck. You're fully responsible for whatever happens. I'll leave you with that as far as this opening goes. I know that was a very long intro, but a lot in there.
Well, I think we got from the intro to the end and back again, so that's okay. We're going to do a couple of loops on this merry-go-round, I think. Good. So tell me, I'm always interested in how people get started. Like, you're clearly an entrepreneurial, guy who's, you're involved in many, many ventures. were your parents entrepreneurial? Did they have their own businesses? Were you brought up with this concept of running your own company?
No, no. My parents, my mother's a Depression era baby, so it's all about constraint and not taking risks and surviving. My father, where I got the bug was he wanted to buy a hardware store, and him and I were very much into making things and building things and repairing things. Today they call it do it yourself kind of DIY things, but back then you went to your local hardware store and he wanted to buy it really bad. He didn't, but that gave me that process got me excited to own my own business one day. And ever since
Yeah,
then, I never looked back. But I was also, I was delivering papers. I know we don't do that now anywhere in the world because it's probably dangerous. But I was a kid, 12 years old, out on my bike at 5 a.m. throwing papers, or not midnight, but at 6 at night throwing newspapers on doors. I had not one route; I had four routes. Right. So
yeah,
I
yeah,
loved money. I loved the idea of not necessarily being my parents with that constraining idea. And I think that was really, I have to say, good, bad, or indifferent. I'm being totally honest. That's what motivated me into entrepreneurship. It was the
yeah,
challenge and the growth and everything, but I also wanted the money. And I did
yeah,
know back then, and I do know now, one of the pathways to riches is own your own business. I mean, own it and
yeah,
sell it and own it and sell it and own it and sell it. Didn't know how I was going to do it all, but I knew that that was a pathway for me. I got to tell you
yeah,
though, once I was in it, that became secondary. The money became secondary to the growth and the success. And now I'm a serial entrepreneur. So I have two businesses right now that are startups because I sold my company and now I'm started two new ones. And I'm very excited about both of them. But I'm starting from scratch again with nothing,
yeah,
right? And funding both companies myself. And but it's from a whole different place now. It's not
yeah,
even
yeah.
about money at all. I don't care. It's about the growth and what I can deliver. It's about legacy. It's about a purpose-driven business, which I hope we talk about. So,
Yeah. Well, look, and I think, as, Dan Pink, I recall saying, money's really important as a motivator. If you look at human behavior, money's important, but only to a point.
yep.
Once people actually have enough money, whatever that actually means, money just disappears off the table as a priority. And all
I
of a
know it's
sudden,
hard.
the key drivers become being self-driven or autonomous, being able to control your own time and the way
Yes,
you do
freedom.
things,
Yeah.
working on things, mastery, working on things that you can get better at because, hey, it's cool getting better at things. It's fun. It's fun to learn. And the third thing he points out was having a sense of purpose, working on something that's bigger than yourself, that contributes to the world in some other way. And I think, what you've just described there, I think pretty much ticks all those boxes.
Oh, that's a great summary of things, and that's really what goes around in my head each and every day. Is that's what's driving it now, and it's hard when that people out there listening, whatever level of success you've had, and you got a little bit of money here and there. It's hard sometimes to hear. It's like, well, it's easy for them to say, right? But it really is true. I can only tell you that at whatever level, the money becomes a burden, or it becomes. I don't want to say a burden because it does allow you freedom and flexibility and things of that nature, but it is
Yeah,
really uninteresting to an entrepreneur. An entrepreneur's brain, we don't stop after we sell the company. We don't stop after there's something in us. It's the same thing as what rock stars do or musicians do and movie actors and actresses do. It's the craft that drives you. It's the same place. Tom Cruise does not need to make another movie. He's rich enough, right? The names could go on and on. The Rolling Stones do not need to keep touring. Maybe they shouldn't, but I'm not going to judge them, right? Or whatever. They have enough money. They do it for the love of the game. And I think that's where you get to. And so for people that are doing it for success reasons, please continue. That's good. Your definition of success, and I write about this in my book, really understand and know your definition of success, kind of like
yeah,
your exit strategy. Your business is all about exit strategies. And that's something that you have to define well before you actually exit, right?
yeah.
Because your
Well,
business is
it's a
completely
good point. I
different
mean,
thing.
sorry to cut across you, yeah,
No, no,
but there's
please.
just to pick up this point around exiting is important because we had a client once who came to us, they wanted to sell. And I'm just going to make up some numbers here because obviously I can't share their name and all the rest. But this particular client said to me, look, I want to sell, I need 5 million. And we actually did a valuation on his business. And as it turns out, I said to him, look, your business is probably worth half that,
Yeah.
two and a half, maybe three on a good day. And of course, he was shattered. This bloke was absolutely shattered because he needed to stop working. He wanted to get out of the business, but he needed this particular amount of money to be able to move on with the rest of his life, pay off his debts, leave a bit in the bank, do a couple of things, and it like $5 million. And I don't want to be what's the word, dismissive here of, $5 million is a lot of money to most people on the planet.
Yes.
But, for him, it was also this element of, well, less than 4 million, 3 million just was not enough. It just couldn't
make any sense.
allow him to do what he needed to do. And so we actually went through a little process with him where I got him to explore and really stress test this 5 million around, well, what is your budget? What are your debts? What's going on? Like, you're saying this number's important, but how much science have you put behind that number? And to be honest, it was all just in the back of an envelope, in the back of his brain.
You make it up.
Yeah, he was making it up. Exactly right. And so I actually encouraged him to go speak to a financial advisor about it and say, look, get some help around this. I'm not, I don't have a horse in this race. I don't, I'm just telling you the facts around what I think your business is worth. But got some advice, pulled it apart, came back and said to me, Simon, that was actually a really cathartic experience. He said, I've actually realized that, the 2.5 to 3, it's still not quite enough. But to be honest, I could probably do this for 3.5. And 4 would be perfect. I'd be absolutely, of course, I'd love 5. I'd love 10. But at the end of the day, I could achieve freedom with 3.5.
Yeah.
And
absolutely.
his mindset shifted. The weight came off the shoulders. Because I told him to get to 5, you're staring down the barrel of probably another solid 3 years minimum of work, effort, intensity. Like, looking at your model, you're going to have to invest time and money. And the thought of grinding that out for another couple of years was horrifying to him. And so, I guess it just touches on this. What is important to you? Because, we said before, money's important, but only to a point. Well, if you could establish with clarity what that number is, once you hit it, geez, your life becomes interesting because you now have different choices that are not security and money constrained.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. And a lot of it is mindset in terms of, and there's probably a good, healthy dose of ego in there as well.
For sure.
I'll tell you what I did. And I can tell you specifically that I did set a target 2 years when coming back to the business. I had 2 years and I set a target and said, we're going to sell for this amount of money. And this is what our driving. When I hired the investment banker, the banker that was actually going to take the company out to do it, I told them that. We ended up, I will tell you, in my case, we ended up with 20% higher valuation. We were not worth what we sold for. We sold for 20% more only because I set a target and said, I will not sell for less than this. Now, we were probably worth around that. It was the numbers were bigger. But there is something about setting a target, but also being realistic about the target. And also, we would have probably sold for the 20% less had that been the only offer. It's funny because I said, don't take an offer back to me below this number, right? And literally, the firm that bought us was a huge private equity firm, very, very famous here in the U.S. called Vista Equity Partners. They're one of the biggest tech companies in the world, actually. They're 8th largest, I think, ranked tech company in the world. And they came back with a number slightly below it. And the investment bankers didn't even share it with me. They came back and they added another, literally to get over it. It was another 5 million. They just needed to get over this number. They just fell short for whatever reason. They just, the guys are like, I can't take that to Ken. They came back with another $5 million the next day. They didn't, and then the banker came to me with the number. I'm like, oh, good, you exceeded my number. They're like, that was the objective. That was the negotiation. And I know it was only $5 million, but in the grand scheme, I say only because we obviously sold for a lot more than that. But that was the story. So I hear what you're saying as well. But you know what? If I was an arrogant CEO that didn't want to get out or didn't see that I could do a lot more after selling the company, then then I might have gotten caught up and really had a challenge in that. But
well, look, and in fairness to your situation, you're talking about the types of the amounts of money that this is not about, oh, I'm going to just make enough to pay off my house and do this and do that. Like it is at a different level.
Yes.
And there are different considerations at that level. So look, I appreciate where you're sort of coming from in that perspective. But talk to me a little bit about the journey though, because you touched on it, obviously, long time in that business and involved in it. And I guess, I don't know, I've been around long enough and been to enough angel meetings and hearing about different business, and everyone reads the success stories of different, unicorn businesses. And it's, well, as a friend of mine said to me, it's all this kind of Instagrammable bullshit, like, oh, I started my company in my parents' garage. Of course, I've got to have some kind of challenge obstacle with either myself or I've had an injury or something. But, add water, presto, unicorn, like, oh, geez, wasn't that bloody simple? And I just find, and this is what we try to unpack on this show a little bit, is okay, we all can see that this was a massive success story, but what the hell happened in the middle for you to kind of get from A to B?
And nobody, it's funny because I lecture at a university here, local university, Northeastern University, which has a campus here in San Francisco, and Berkeley, UC Berkeley, which a lot of your listeners would know that as one of a wonderful school. And anytime I'm lecturing to a Gen Zer, 20 to 23 years old, the first thing they say is, Ken, why did it take you 21 years to sell your business? What the hell's wrong with you? I expect to be a unicorn in 3 to 5 years, 3 years, not 5 years, 3 years. I'm like, well, what planet are you coming from? And so, of course, because I'm now a bit older, I basically berate them in a positive way. With the thing is, and they point to we have a lot of startups here in the Silicon Valley in San Francisco. So they point to Airbnb, and I'm like, or Uber or whatever. And I'm like, do you know the stories? I mean, or DocuSign, or I was involved in DocuSign. I had friends that worked there. My investors were invested in it. I knew my ex-employees actually worked at DocuSign, as an example. And it's like, it took 10 to 15 years before they came the overnight success that they were, or Airbnb or Uber or any Uber. And these are the most successful examples that everybody points to. What about the rest of us? You sell and it's almost like it's never enough. It's like not enough because you're always being compared to something bigger and better. That's completely BS and ridiculous, right? Roller coaster. Go ahead.
Yeah, and I was going to say, and how do you measure success anyway? Because and I haven't looked at it lately, but I'm pretty sure that Uber's still not profitable. So
no,
they might have
and struggling mightily right now. Yeah,
absolutely. Right. So their equity has done the big J curve, but at the end of the day, your backers aren't going to just keep pouring money into it. At some point, they want a return. So you got it. Yeah.
Well, here's the wake-up call. There's a couple of things in there. One is the wake-up call that happens, and this happened to us in our business when Sequoia Capital gave a very famous meeting in 2008. 2008 was a housing crisis, and everybody knows in the Silicon Valley. Everybody knows this meeting. I was there, and it was called the Stuck Pig. And I'm sorry for the analogy, Stuck Pig meeting. And they showed a slide that had a pig with a knife in it or something like that, or a fork, I can't remember. And this went viral immediately. Any entrepreneur knew this at the time, which was basically Sequoia Capital saying, you're not getting another dime from us. We want you to cut as deep as you possibly can because you aren't getting any money for 2 to 4 years. We're done. And if you're about ready to go out of business, we're not helping you. Go out of business. That was in 2008. That was the message. And that was to every one of their portfolio companies, including us. Thank goodness we didn't need the money. We were fine. We were also almost profitable at the time. I don't think our company was actually ever fully profitable because what we did is we continued to reinvest in growth. And that's part of the strategy because we knew profits are not going to sell the company. Revenue multiples are going to make this company worth what it is. Not every business is like that. There are some businesses out there from your listeners that profit is really important. And they've got to show that profit. But for our tech business, it was all about growth, customers, and reoccurring revenue. That was it. And that's still the cases today. So we reinvested everything, absolutely. But, that idea of getting cut off. And by the way, a lot of companies, that just happened to. It just happened to in March this year. We're hitting the downturn, the recession, the this, the that. And all of a sudden, companies, and I actually was on the board of one that is now no longer in part because of that. And they were companies that didn't have enough wherewithal to stick through it. And one of the things that I've always tried to do, first of all, have a great financial plan. I got to tell you, have a 3-year or 5-year financial plan, but at least a 3-year with 1 year that's super tuned into exactly what you're doing. And you update it every month. Your CFO or you or whomever you do it. I don't care if you're a small business or a big business, you have to do that. And I got to tell you, most of the businesses listening right now do not have that plan because
Absolutely.
I know that because when you go in to do their exit, you ask them for this plan and they don't have it. You can't do an exit without the plan. It doesn't work.
Yeah, no, you're spot on. And I just to reinforce that point, I mean, anybody listening to this, if you're not doing this kind of forecasting, how can you possibly understand what's coming in front of your business? Like, you can't predict everything. But geez, if you aren't at least mapping the things you already know and the things you have greater ability to predict, you're just driving blind. It's just madness.
Well, if you think about it, and I know your listeners possibly have encountered this, I encountered it. We had to do 2 layoffs in the history of MarketLive. Both were devastating. One, I had to lay off 10 employees when we had 100. So it's 10% of the staff. This was in 2000 and, oh goodness. Well, this 2000, I can't remember what it was. 2001, 2002. We hadn't even gotten funded back then. And it was devastating for me. To think that I had to lay off anybody It was the most heart-wrenching thing I've ever done in my life as a new entrepreneur. And I'm sure people can identify with that. Now, today, maybe it's a little bit easier to do. It's just the hardest thing. That was not the culture of the company. I was all about supporting and helping and, making sure our employees were extremely well taken care of. And then we did another layoff that was done by a different CEO later in 2008, 2009, somewhere around there after he'd messed up the company. And it was also fairly small. But here's the deal around the layoffs. Here's the mistake that most entrepreneurs make. They wait too long and then they can't affect the outcome. So you're like, I don't want to lay anybody off. I don't want to lay anybody off. I don't want to cut back. I don't want to slow down growth. I'm running out of money. I'm running out of money. I'm running out of money. You're going to hit a wall. Sorry for the audio guy. You're going to hit a wall. And then all of a sudden you can't do it. And then all of a sudden impact. If you're going to do layoffs, you got to lay off. And here's my advice on layoffs. You do it one time. You do it as deep as you need to do it, but you only do it one time. And everybody else after that occurrence, you reassure them that this, to the best of your ability and your knowledge, this is all we need to do. Because then you get the camaraderie back, and so everybody's not worried about their job. Now, if you can't make that guarantee, don't do it, of course. But the idea of you got to manage those layoffs and you got to communicate them. Don't send out emails. You're the entrepreneur. You do it yourself. You meet with every person. You lay them off one-on-one. I don't mean to focus on layoffs, but I don't mean layoffs, just layoffs, cutbacks as well. We cut back too late. You need to be thinking 3 to 6 months before you actually need to do it, what's going on, and make some of those moves early.
Yeah. And if I can add a point to that too, because I completely agree with everything you've just said. But the only thing I'd say as well is with these layoffs is sometimes in life, it's not what you do, it's how you do it. And so you got to do it with a level of decency, because the people left over, they not only are they thinking, well, they might think for a moment, geez, okay, I'm safe for now. But if they see that you've treated people badly, then all they're going to think is that's how you treat everybody. And you lose their trust, you lose their respect, and all that camaraderie, that culture, the vibe, all of that, it's gone.
You have to be very careful about your integrity. I will give you a use case of a company that I'm involved with right now that split their company. I won't say who it was or anything of that nature. And you know what? They didn't take care of the employees in the old company. They just took care of everybody in the new company. And the employees in the old company, which still exists, are all looking at them going, huh? I now thought I trusted you and now I don't, right?
Yeah.
They're like, something didn't happen here, right? I'm just using a use case that I've experienced. And it's like, that's not right. So anyway, the point is that you've got to really uphold with integrity. Two things that I think are life lessons that I learned through my business. Number one is that after the first layoff that we did, I did not lose any employee for 2.5 years. I even had to do a salary reduction as part of that layoff for the people that were there. I paid everybody back because and we gave them additional stock grants and money back. And I tried to minimize as much as humanly possible. So they knew I was coming from integrity and that we were going to succeed. Not one person left for 2.5 years. The average employee in the Silicon Valley lasts for about 9 months. And this was a stat 5 or 6 years ago. So it's even worse now. Our average employee was about 10 years. We kept our employees because we kept them happy. We paid them a little bit more. We weren't in the Silicon Valley, but we kept our group. We were north of the Silicon Valley, but we kept our group together and keeping those employees for long term. And then we did the same thing with our customers. We lost a lot of customers, I will tell you. We didn't always execute right, but we had customers that were with us for 15 and 20 years on e-commerce software where they usually stay 3 years. So 20 years we had customers. I can name them. I can name 20 of them right now that were on our software for that length of time. The bond and the relationships that you build, it's all about the relationships, all about your integrity. And let me give you one final point on this thing. One employee, very an important employee to me, one day said, Ken, you're walking around our campus, and we have like 4 or 5 buildings here. I'm still in the same spot, even though I sold the company. I'm still in the same I have a littler office now. And we had 4 or 5 buildings. You walk around from building to building with your head down. You look stressed out. An employee would come up to you. They wouldn't make eye contact with them. Seemed like you're having a bad day. They internalize that. They internalize your challenge as they're doing a horrible job. Could you stop doing that? The second she said it, I went, and anytime I walk out of my office, smile on my face. No, don't fake it, but smile on my face. Look up, eye contact. Hello, how are you? By name. For the rest of my career, I have done that and made sure I always acknowledged, always smiled. I'm not saying be fake. Be yourself. Your challenge, you can say, God, I'm having a rough day today, but you're interacting with them, and they won't think it's you. It just is something that you don't even realize as an entrepreneur. The quote unquote power, and I don't mean power in the traditional sense, the influence that you have over people that you're working with, customers, And and the other thing I'll say is lose your ego. I talk about this in my book. I've got a whole section dedicated to managing your ego. You got to lose your ego, because
Yeah.
if you're going to go into entrepreneurship and you're going to do things out of ego, because I got to be right, I have to be the smartest brain in the room. Let me tell you, my mentor also told me this. My Sequoia Capital mentor told me this is a good piece of advice I got. He's like, Ken, you know what? You don't need to be the smartest brain in the room. Let everybody else talk, and then extract out from all the things that they're saying. At the end of the day, when a decision is made, you make the decision, but you make it based on the smart people in the room, right? If you're
Yep.
hiring, by the way, let me give you one last thing I got. If you're hiring, don't, and you're in a startup and you're an engineer and you want to start up a tech company and you hire another engineer or you partner with another engineer, that's exactly the wrong person to hire. Hire the person that is exactly opposite you. You're the engineer, hire a sales and marketing person. Whatever the
Yes.
disciplines are, you want complementary. You don't want the same, right? The complementary meaning different, I should say, different in that if you're not a finance person and you're running a services business, maybe you hire the finance person or the marketing person or the engineer or the tech. Anyway, it's just a couple of things that I've run through in my career. Whew, and I've made all the mistakes, by the way, all the mistakes.
That's awesome. Ken, we were chatting a little bit offline. You're talking then about layoffs and doing things the right way. And once again, I agree with all of that. But obviously, you can't please everybody all the time. And I mean, layoffs. Obviously, most people aren't going to be happy with the layoff. But it's we were chatting a little offline before we started about your exit, and you talked a little bit about there'd been people who got some shares along the way. But obviously, when you're going through this, what any person genuinely would look at and say, "What a magnificent exit!" But still, in that scenario, you couldn't please everybody, right? I mean, are you happy to talk through that a little?
Yes, absolutely. Two things that you have to realize when and we had about 250 employees. So we were a decent sized company. We weren't super small. We weren't super big. But we had about 250 employees. And there's two things that lead up to what you just asked. One is that it's kind of like, I'll say the president of the United States or president of Australia or prime minister. I'm sorry, you don't have a president down there. Prime minister, I should know. I love Australia. But I know that you're worldwide as well. So wherever you are, we have our crazy system of politics here in the US and it's crazier every day. But, the president has an approval rating right now. Biden has an approval rating about 40 or 42%, understandable in terms of being, where we are in the history. But if they have over 50%, they are doing incredible. Like Obama, it's like you got 53%, you're like the best president in the world. Okay, same thing with a CEO, or with a CEO and or with an entrepreneur, founder, entrepreneur. Here's the deal: none of your employees are going to have the same perspective that you do going into this. Absolutely, they can't. Because what your job, by the way, your job as the entrepreneur / CEO of the company is to be the orchestra leader. You're the conductor. You are not playing any one of the instruments. And this is where I made my mistake. I thought I played all the instruments. I can market, I can sell, I can engineer, I can operate, I can do whatever, right? No, I stink at all of that. But I'm kind of good enough to know enough about everything because that's my job. I'm the conductor that brings it all together. Don't try to play every instrument, right? Okay, now fast forward, that was a little piece of side advice there. Fast forward to you're not going to be liked by everybody, so don't try. It's not going to work. Same thing with the president of the United States or wherever. He or she is not going to be liked by everybody. It's not going to happen, okay? So you got to go in with the right mindset and be okay with that because you're looking at everything from a different perspective and a different lens than each individual is. And that's your job, okay? You also may not be liked by your investors and VCs. You don't need to be. You don't need to be liked. They need to respect you. You don't need to be liked. Now, let's fast forward now to selling the company. Whew, I can say a couple of things about this. I can say about before and after. And it's not all rosy. In fact, one of my favorite podcasts was on from startups.com was, life after selling is not so rosy. I forgot the exact name, but that's
Yep.
essentially what it is. So when in my situation, we had about 2% of the company that was unallocated. And so I had discretionary. Everybody had options in the company. Everybody, and we accelerated vesting. So anybody that had options now owns shares, right? Accelerated vesting on the sale of the company. That was generous. And but then I had a discretionary bucket that I could give to anybody I wanted. We all agreed to allocate. The board, everybody agreed that I could allocate 2% to everybody, making people even more millionaires than they already were. A lot of cases, it wasn't enough. They came back to me. They wanted more. The VCs wanted more. The greed was there. It amazed me. I'm like, this is supposed to be the greatest event of my existence in terms of business existence. And why do I feel kind of crappy? I had to fight with one of my VCs. I had to fight with for 3 or 4 weeks because things that they promised me all of a sudden, because we didn't act on them, but we talked about it in good faith, they didn't want to act on it. It's like, what are you talking about? And ultimately I acquiesced and or worked it out, acquiesced and worked out to where everybody's happy and we're good friends now. But for 3 weeks, we were the worst of enemies. I got to tell you, going through that, the greed that happens in the exit, and you see this, Simon, because you see this on every deal. You see this not once, but you see it throughout. The entrepreneurs are greedy, the VCs are greedy, the angel investors are greedy, and the employees are greedy. Everybody's
Yeah.
greedy. Now, there are some people that are not, don't get me wrong. But when it comes to the actual end event, when you're down to the last couple of weeks, that's when the greed comes out because now it becomes real. Before then, they're like, no big deal. Everything's great. We're all
Yeah.
cool. Hang loose. Yeah, no, not when it comes down to the last couple of minutes here. Then the last thing, so that was an experience that I had that I thought, God, I'm doing really good things for people, and then there were people that came back to me and said I didn't get enough,
Yeah.
or I thought I was going to be a millionaire. Well, you're a low level, entry level person, and because we sold the company, you're going to become a millionaire. That's not the way it works. Maybe at Google, but not here, right?
Yeah.
The last
Yeah.
thing I'll
Yeah.
say is the feeling after you exit is both euphoric for a while because you got a bunch of cash in the bank and you can go travel and do that, which I did. I traveled for a year, best year of my life, loved it. Highly recommend people taking off time. But then there's an emptiness that happens. Here's the day in and day out, 16 hours a day, 12 hours a day, pushing, 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 growing, growing, growing. You've got all this dynamic nature to your business. You've got hundreds and hundreds of customers, biggest retailers in the world. We did $2 billion a year in online sales for our customers every year. Pretty big responsibility. When I
Yeah.
called up the CEO of whatever, I had Warner Brothers and Disney and Armani and Party City. And these are some companies here in the U.S. and around the world. Johnson and Johnson, all their brands, right? And so I had responsibility, all gone. Nobody cared. I mean, they all liked me. Everything was good. But after I sold the company, it's kind of like, yeah, they're still on LinkedIn and certainly still friendly with everybody, but they're all gone. You have this, what you go from 150 miles an hour or kilometers, whatever their translation is. Sorry, I'm American. I can't help it.
Yeah.
To literally like, oh my God, what am I going to do with the rest of my life? And
Yeah.
I will say I was 50 when I sold, so I still have a little bit more in me. And you could be 40, 50, 30, or you could be 70. You still may have it in you. But there's an emptiness that occurred, and I needed to replace that emptiness. You can have your families, your all that other stuff, but the business side of your life, there's that emptiness there. And maybe it doesn't happen to everybody, but everybody that I've ever talked to, that exists. And then you start filling it up. Because again, like I told you, you can only watch Netflix so long. You can only mow the lawn and garden for so long. You can only travel for so much. Really, honestly, if you're an entrepreneur, retirement just probably may not necessarily resonate. True entrepreneurs don't really retire. Just like
Yeah.
rock stars and actresses, they don't really retire. So
Yep.
anyway,
Well, look.
that's my journey. I finally though found my way, but it took a couple of years. And then after that, I kind of screwed up my businesses a little bit. They're good, but they're not that good. Now I feel like finally, after 5 or 6 years, now I'm really excited about what I'm launching, what my new company, Microcasting, which is in the e-learning space, completely separate space than where I was before. I
Yep.
absolutely love it. And I love the creation process, and making something out of nothing is so rewarding. So that's where the
Yeah.
journey is today.
Well, that's fantastic. And so, a little segue. So, talk to us a little bit more about microcasting. I mean, that's obviously getting your focus and attention. So, it's yeah. Can you share a bit about it?
Yeah, real quick. I started. I wanted to learn the e-learning business, so I started a site called EntrepreneurNow.com, where I did a bunch of e-learning. I have, and it's still up. And by the way, tons of free resources for people to go and grab, lots of courses and other things. But I wanted to really learn e-learning from the ground up, and I did. And I spent several years doing that. And then I'm like, okay, now I'm a platform guy. I'm a software guy. I want to go build something that's not been built before. I want to do e-learning in a different way. And so
Yep.
we are rolling out kind of e-learning for sales and marketing, for coaches, for influencers, for consultants, for course creators, but also for the purposes of generating sales and marketing. So you're using e-learning to generate sales and marketing activity, customer portals, partner portals, new and unique ways of engaging customers through the lead gen process, lead nurturing process, prospecting process, conversion process. That's what our engine does, but it uses e-learning to do it. And e-learning
Yep.
is really the new content marketing, and that's what this represents. So getting such good response and reviews from people that want to do it. Everything from a coach all the way to large companies can use this platform. So we're super excited.
Yeah, that's awesome, Ken. I really look forward to seeing how microcasting goes
Thank you.
and hearing more about it. I'm sure it'll be a huge success. I think we're probably about out of time at the moment, but are you happy if people wanted to reach out or connect or message you or anything like that?
Absolutely. On LinkedIn, Ken Burke, of course, you can find me there, pretty identifiable. But in addition, kenburke.com has my book in case anybody's interested. Nobody needs to buy it. I don't care. There's some sample chapters up there, a lot of good videos. It's kind of a cross between us. And I just published it, like it's very recent. It became an Amazon #1 new release. I was very excited for the day. It was like one day that happened, right? But still, it's enough to promote it. So, if you know
Yeah,
the
yeah,
game,
yeah.
that's good. And it's really a cross between personal development, a little bit of spirituality, a little bit of things that are how do you really live an extraordinary life, and then how do you? It's 5 keys to thriving in business and in life. Prosper. 5 keys to thriving in business and in life. And at the end of the day,
Nice.
we need to make sure that we're happy, that we're experiencing joy, and that we're fulfilled in our business and our personal life. That's at the end of the day how all this comes together. Because if you're struggling right now in your business and it's not in sync and alignment with you, hey, I get the struggles. But if you're not having fun with it and you're not really on that path, you probably shouldn't do it, right? And sorry to
Yeah.
leave with that, but
No,
there's
I
a
think
lot of
that's
ways to get through it as well, and that's what I talk about in the book.
I think that's a fantastic bookend. If your life is a journey, your business is an asset. It's not you. If you're not
Bingo.
enjoying your journey, do something about it.
Ooh,
All right, do something different because
brilliant.
life is short. So
Absolutely. The one thing you have is time. That's the only asset that you actually have. And that is, I treasure that. That's the one thing I obsess over about where I give my time, who I give my time to, what people I associate with, because that's time as well, and what businesses that I do and or won't do. The only thing we have is time. Period.
yeah,
Full stop.
it's a lovely thought to finish on. It's something that my kids were asking about what to buy their grandfather for his birthday, and I was having my boys are 13 and 15, and I was having a little chuckle because really there's no material possession that
Right.
them or frankly probably even myself could buy my father-in-law that he wants, needs, cares about he's been successful in his own right. He has everything he
Everything.
wants to have. It's not about stuff. And so I was saying to my kids, what do you give the man who has everything? Well, you give him the one thing that he values is your time.
Yep.
Go and spend time with him. Go and show him that's valuable and important, and that he will treasure.
He will treasure forever and ever. And that is, yeah, that is so, wow. That's so powerful. And it's so true as well.
Yeah. Ked, thank you so much for your time. You've been really generous. I loved hearing your story.
Oh, I
It's
appreciate
been
that. Thank
exciting,
you, Simon.
inspiring. I'm sure there'll be lots of people out there pretty excited after hearing from you. So, really, really, appreciate it all. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you so much. I really appreciate the time.
Awesome. Well, thanks again for tuning in to the Buy, Grow, Sell podcast. I hope you've enjoyed this episode. We will be putting up the show notes as always with some contacts there for Ken, but most importantly to his website. Go and check out his book. If you do send him a message, as always, we say, please put a message in there. Maybe let him know you heard him on the podcast so he doesn't think you're some random stranger just sending connection requests. So that'd be great. Thanks for all for tuning in, and we'll see you on the next episode.